Imagine a world connected. A world of superpowers, their kings writing to each other like brothers, trading gold, copper, and tin across vast seas. A world of magnificent palaces, of sprawling cities with libraries holding the wisdom of generations. This was the world of the late Bronze Age. The Egyptian New Kingdom, the mighty Hittite Empire, the Mycenaean Greeks of Homer's legends. They were the titans of their time, part of a sophisticated international network. It felt permanent, it felt invincible, and then in the space of a single generation it all burned. Palace after palace, city after city, from Greece to Anatolia and the Levant was violently destroyed, never to be rebuilt. Literacy vanished for centuries. Entire empires disappeared from history. The world plunged into a dark age. What could cause such a total catastrophic collapse? The few survivors, like the Egyptians, gave a terrifying name to the destroyers. They called them the Sea Peoples, a mysterious confederation of maritime invaders who swept across the sea in a wave of destruction. For over a century, this has been the accepted story. A simple, brutal narrative of barbarian hordes destroying civilization. But is it the truth? Or is it a convenient story told by the last empire left standing? The evidence today points to something far more complex and far more terrifying. This wasn't just an invasion, this was a system failure. And the Sea Peoples were not the cause of the collapse. They were merely the final symptom of a world that was already dying. To understand how the world ended, we must first understand the world that was. The 13th century BC was an age of unprecedented globalization. A letter from the Hittite king to the pharaoh of Egypt could be sent and received in a matter of weeks. A single shipwreck found off the coast of modern-day Turkey, the Uluburun ship, was a time capsule of this interconnectedness. It carried copper from Cyprus, tin from Afghanistan, cobalt from Egypt, glass from Mesopotamia, ebony from Africa, swords from Italy. It was a floating warehouse, a testament to a system built on trust, trade, and stability. The great powers were the Hittites in Anatolia, masters of iron and chariots, the New Kingdom of Egypt, wealthy beyond imagination, and the Mycenaeans in Greece, fortress builders and sea traders who inspired the legends of Achilles and Agamemnon. Between them lay a tapestry of powerful city-states like Ugarit on the Syrian coast. Ugarit was the New York of its day, a cosmopolitan hub where dozens of languages were spoken and goods from across the known world were traded. Their scribes wrote on clay tablets, and their libraries were a treasure trove of diplomacy, literature, and commerce. They felt secure behind their strong walls, a vital part of a world that seemed too big to fail. But this complex system, for all its glory, was dangerously brittle. Its entire economy, its entire military might was built on one thing: bronze. And bronze requires two metals: copper, which was plentiful, and tin, which was rare and had to be imported over thousands of miles. The entire world's military-industrial complex depended on these fragile, extended supply chains. For decades it worked. But what happens when one of those chains breaks? The first signs of trouble were not ships on the horizon, but clouds that failed to appear. Climate data pulled from ancient pollen and lakebed sediments tells a clear story. Around 1250 BC, the Mediterranean world was struck by a prolonged, severe period of drought, a mega-drought that lasted for decades. Letters found in the ruins of Ugarit tell a desperate story. The king of Ugarit writes to a neighboring king, "There is famine in my house." A high official from the Hittite court writes to Ugarit begging for a shipment of 2,000 measures of grain to be sent to a starving region. He calls it a matter of life or death. The drought withered crops, starved livestock, and drove desperate people from their lands. The intricate palace economies, which collected grain from farmers and redistributed it, began to break down. The palaces hoarded what they had while the countryside starved. The gap between the ruling elites and the common people widened into a chasm of resentment. A dangerous internal pressure was building across the whole system. A hungry population does not stay loyal for long. This glorious, interconnected world was starving, and its complex economy, so efficient in times of peace, now became a liability. The overspecialization of the palace economies meant there was no backup plan. They were designed for one thing: the efficient flow of goods in a stable world. When that stability vanished, the system seized up. Trade routes, once arteries of prosperity, became vectors of vulnerability. As famine spread, states grew selfish. They stopped exporting grain. They hoarded resources. The international club of brother kings was breaking apart. And then, the ground began to shake. Geological studies have revealed that this period also coincided with what is known as an earthquake storm. A series of major earthquakes rocked Greece, Anatolia, and the Levant. We see the evidence in the ruins. Walls are cracked. Buildings collapsed and were hastily rebuilt, only to collapse again. Imagine the psychological impact. Your crops are failing, your children are hungry, and the very ground beneath your feet is betraying you. It would have felt like the gods themselves had declared war on humanity. So now, let's take stock. We have widespread famine. We have internal unrest. We have the breakdown of international trade. We have the vital supply of tin for bronze weapons becoming unreliable. And we have cities physically weakened by earthquakes. The entire Bronze Age world was a dry forest, waiting for a spark. And that spark came from the sea. This is where the Sea Peoples enter the story, but who were they? The Egyptian inscriptions at Medinet Habu, a temple built by the pharaoh Ramesses III, give us our most dramatic and most biased account. They depict a coalition of invaders: the Peliset, the Jaker, the Shekelesh, the Denyen, the Weshesh. Ramesses portrays them as a monolithic, destructive force, a confederation of evil that laid their hands upon the lands as far as the circuit of the earth, their hearts confident and trusting. He describes how they swept down from the north, destroying everything in their path. The Hittite Empire, destroyed. The Mycenaean fortresses, burned. The jewel of the Levant, Ugarit, wiped off the map. A chilling letter, the very last one ever sent from Ugarit, found baked in the fires that destroyed the city, was a desperate plea for help. The king of Ugarit writes to the king of Cyprus, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came. My cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country. The enemy is at my gates." Ugarit received no help. It was utterly destroyed, its location lost to history for 3,000 years. The picture Ramesses paints is one of an organized, almost nation-like invasion. But the archaeology tells a different, messier story. The Sea Peoples were not a unified army. They were a diverse collection of displaced, desperate people. Some were almost certainly pirates and raiders taking advantage of the chaos. But others were likely migrants, entire communities uprooted by the famine and collapse in their own lands, traveling with their families in ox carts, searching for a new place to live. Some were likely rebels, peasants and lower classes rising up against the very palace elites who had hoarded grain and let them starve. They were the symptoms of the collapse, not the cause. They were the human debris of a dying world, now transformed into a wave that would break the last remaining fragments of civilization. Egypt, the last titan standing, prepared for the onslaught. Rameses III knew they were coming. He fortified the coast and the Nile Delta. The final confrontation was an epic clash fought on both land and sea. On land, Egyptian chariots confronted the invaders and their families in their ox carts. But the decisive battle was on the water in the mouths of the Nile. Rameses, a clever strategist, used the terrain to his advantage. He lured the Sea People's fleet into the narrow channels of the delta. Unlike the open Mediterranean here, their maneuverability was limited. Egyptian ships, powered by rowers, could outmaneuver the sailing ships of the invaders. Archers lined the banks, raining down arrows. It was a slaughter. The Egyptian inscriptions show a chaotic scene. Ships capsized, men drowning, the Nile running red. Rameses III had won. He had saved Egypt. He declared it the greatest victory in history and carved it in stone for all eternity. But what kind of victory was it? Egypt survived, but it was mortally wounded. The war had exhausted its treasury and manpower. It would never again be the same imperial power. It retreated into itself, and its long, slow decline began. Rameses saved Egypt, but he couldn't save their world. It was already gone. In the wake of the collapse, a profound darkness fell across the eastern Mediterranean. The great palaces were ruins. The complex web of trade was gone. The art of writing, known as Linear B, vanished in Greece for over 400 years. Population levels plummeted. Cities were abandoned, becoming small, impoverished villages. It was a total system reset. An age of heroes was replaced by an age of survival. But this darkness was not an ending. It was a transformation. The collapse of the rigid, top-heavy palace system, for all the suffering it caused, created a vacuum. And into this vacuum, new peoples, new ideas, and new ways of life could emerge. The old empires were gone, but the survivors adapted. On the coast of the Levant, the Canaanite cities, once subjects of Egypt, were now free. They rebuilt, and using their maritime skills, they would become the Phoenicians, one of the most influential trading cultures in history, who would give the world a revolutionary invention, the alphabet. In the highlands of Canaan, new groups, perhaps including refugees from the chaos, began to coalesce. This period sees the emergence of the people who would become the ancient Israelites. And what of the Sea Peoples? Those who were defeated and captured by Ramesses were often settled in Egyptian forts in Canaan. One group in particular, the Peliset, would give their name to the region for all time: Palestine. The feared invaders became neighbors. In Greece, the Mycenaean palaces were gone, but the people remained. In the centuries of darkness, new social structures formed. New legends were told around campfires, tales of a lost golden age of heroes and gods. These stories would eventually be written down, becoming the Iliad and the Odyssey. From the ashes of the Bronze Age, the seeds of classical Greece were sown. So how did the Bronze Age collapse? There was no single cause. There was no one villain. It was a cascade failure. A civilization that was too successful, too complex, and too interconnected became too brittle. Climate change triggered famine. Famine triggered migration and rebellion. The breakdown of trade crippled their militaries. Earthquakes shattered their walls and their faith. The Sea Peoples were not the tsunami that destroyed the world. They were just the crest of a wave that had been building for a century. It's a story from over 3,000 years ago, but it carries a chillingly modern warning. It shows how even the most sophisticated, globalized civilizations are fragile. It proves that a perfect storm of interconnected crises can bring down a world. The Bronze Age collapse is a testament to the fact that nothing is permanent. And it serves as a stark reminder that we must understand our own systems, our own fragilities, before our own waves begin to build.